At some point in your life, you might have dreamed of visiting Miami Beach, or perhaps you've already been. With its pristine white sands and crystal clear waters, maybe you've even wished you could pack up and move here. In 2023, Miami ranked number 1 in the US for highest number of centi-millionaires, which are those with a net worth of over $100 million. There was also a 75% growth rate of millionaires from 2012 to 2022. And at the end of 2022, Miami was said to be home to 38,000 millionaires, over 700 centi-millionaires, and 12 billionaires. To be clear, not everyone who lives here is drowning in wealth. The median income, for example, is significantly lower than both the national average and the state average. Despite this, though, Miami Beach has had a long history of being the playground for the wealthy. Have you ever wondered how Miami Beach got this reputation of being so wealthy, or wondered why so many rich people live here? Is this cluster of wealthy individuals just a coincidence, or was it planned that way? Well, today on Across the Globe, we're going to be looking at exactly this and uncovering the reasons why Miami Beach is so rich and famous. And to do that, we need to take a look at this area's history. Miami Beach's founding. Miami Beach was established all the way back in 1915. While there were a handful of people who had a significant role in its founding, one of the most famous was Carl Fisher, who is known today as the father of Miami Beach. If you don't know who Carl Fisher is, let me explain. Born in 1874, Fisher basically came into the world as an entrepreneur. He had an insatiable desire for business, and he was good at it. In fact, Fisher developed an interest in an industry that would soon go on to be one of the biggest industries in America at the time, the automotive industry. Rightly convinced that automobiles were the future of transportation as opposed to, train or horse and carriage, he took everything he had and poured it into the automobile industry. And it paid off nicely, to put it mildly. For instance, Fisher co-founded Prestolite Co. in 1904 at the age of 30. The company would go on to become a key player in the production and distribution of automobile headlights, which is a pretty important industry if you ask me. Later, he co-founded and was the president of Indianapolis Speedway, which became a popular car racing destination. As you can imagine, these forays in the business world allowed Fisher to develop quite a bit of wealth. And while estimates on his net worth vary, what is clear is that he had more money than he knew what to do with. All of this paved the way, pun intended, for what was to come next. In 1910, Fisher took a fateful trip with his wife at the time, Jane, to Miami Beach. According to her, he fell in love with the area almost immediately. By the end of the trip, he apparently told her that he was going to build a city there, presumably where other wealthy people like himself could vacation or even live. And Fisher, not one to come up with an idea and then not execute on it, immediately set to work on achieving his vision. Soon, Fisher had bought up land in the Miami Beach area and, in 1913, constructed the Collins Bridge, which connected Miami Beach to Miami. He then teamed up with several prominent Miami businessmen known as the Loomis Brothers to help Miami Beach grow further. Notably, the Loomis Brothers also bought land in the area and ended up offering it up for free to those who agreed to move and build there. Despite this investment in the area, though, things were a little slow starting off. Remember, this was in the early 1900s, before people could easily hop on a plane and be on the other side of the country in a matter of mere hours. To travel all the way from the Midwest or the East Coast to a place few had been to before was a big gamble for most. But Fisher didn't let this discourage him. In fact, he just doubled down harder. For instance, he started up a series of publicity stunts to try and frame Miami Beach as a place that had to be seen to be believed. One of these involved photographing none other than his pet baby elephant on the sand. Surprisingly, this worked. Between 1920 and 1925, the population of Miami Beach increased 440%. But it wasn't ordinary people moving there. After all, most people didn't have the resources to just move across the country. No, these weren't ordinary people. They were the super wealthy. Think tycoons like Harvey Firestone, another automobile giant. There was also J.C. Penney, who founded the famous J.C. Penney department store chain. Others included Albert Champion, who not only was a champion bicycle racer, but also a successful entrepreneur in his own right, American inventor Frank Sieberling, and millionaire Rockwell LaGorce. Most of these people built mansions right alongside the coast, in what is known today as Millionaires Row. Furthermore, one of the richest and most famous American families, the Vanderbilt family, took over an entire island there. This island is named Fisher Island after, you guessed it, Carl Fisher. As the story goes, William Vanderbilt II became enamored with the area, and in 1925, he decided to build a $1.5 million mansion on the island, where he could also conveniently dock his 250-foot yacht. For some context, that $1.5 million mansion would be worth about $21.8 million today. Clearly, things were going exactly the way Fisher planned, and with the attraction of millionaires here, things had to be, well, millionaire-worthy. That meant that certain amenities needed to be put in place, like golf courses, hotels, parks, and a pier, and of course, they were. By this point, Miami Beach had been properly established as a haven for the rich and famous. Fisher had started up the city of his dreams, and in doing so, he had proven himself not only to be a wildly successful businessman and a flourishing city planner, but a pretty great publicist on top of all of that. Now, unfortunately for Fisher, things didn't come to a very happy end for him. Shortly after the success of his Miami Beach project, he and his wife got divorced, and he ran into significant money troubles soon after that. Tragically, he ended up losing pretty much everything he had built. But that's a story for another time. The point here is this: Carl Fisher was instrumental in turning Miami Beach into the place it is today. Miami Beach's growth. At this point in our story, Miami Beach had become one of the most desirable places in the country to have a home. In 1930, for instance, the population of Miami Beach was 6,500. But by 1935, that number jumped to 13,350. And by 1940, the population had increased all the way to 28,000 people. The area experienced a lot of historical events in the next few decades, like becoming a military training ground during World War II, receiving refugees from Cuba after Fidel Castro assumed control of the country in 1959, and undergoing more than a few hurricanes. But through all of this, it was able to hold on to the reputation that Carl Fisher had built for it all the way back in the early 1900s. And that brings us to the current day. Millionaires Row, where giants like J.C. Penney and Harvey Firestone once lived, is still alive and well, with many wealthy people residing here. And in the meantime, some even wealthier enclaves have sprung up. Fisher Island, for instance, is still a popular spot for the mega-rich, though it's no longer the private playground of the Vanderbilt family. Instead, numerous celebrities settled on the island in the 1980s, like Julia Roberts, Mel Brooks, and Oprah Winfrey. Their presence here has only perpetuated Miami Beach's reputation as a place for the rich and famous. Today, the median home value on Fisher Island is $4.5 million, which is not a cheap sum by any measure. Then there is the famous Indian Creek Island. This island had long been an area for the rich and famous. However, after a home sold here for a record $47 million in 2012, suddenly it seemed like every multimillionaire and billionaire wanted to have a place here. The island is so luxurious that it even acquired the nickname Miami's Billionaire Bunkers. That's no random nickname. The island is so exclusive that it has armed guards surrounding the entrance to it, along with a 13-person private police force and a round-the-clock armed Marine patrol. And beyond its security, the houses really are for the wealthiest of the wealthy. For instance, Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen paid $17 million for their home in Indian Creek Village, and one of the most expensive pieces of real estate on the island was listed for a massive $59 million in May of 2022. But things don't stop there. It's not just Millionaires Row, Fisher Island, and Indian Creek Island that attract the wealthy. Miami Beach is also home to an 8-acre island called, appropriately, Privé Island, which has luxury condos priced in the multi-millions. Additionally, modern-day Carl Fisher types seem to have stepped up to the plate as well. For instance, prominent designer Cohen Oltash recently presented a plan for a group of, get this, private floating islands in the Miami Beach area. Called the Amalara Private Islands, the idea Oltash came up with was to construct 30 floating islands, each at 10,000 square feet, with a floating villa and a private sandy beach. The plans also include a so-called VIP amenity island to serve the needs of the community. While the plan is still in the works, this will no doubt be yet another community that carries on the image of Miami Beach as one of the wealthiest and most exclusive areas in the world. What about the worst places to live in Florida? Watch this video to learn about that.